morning, boys and girls. I'm going to share a special book with you called America's White Table. And before I read the book, I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. This is a book that tells us a little bit more about Veterans Day. It's kind of a sad book, and it's okay to feel sad, but it's also okay to feel proud of our country. So let me get started. America's White Table. This book is by Margot Raven, and it's illustrated by Mike Benny. It was just a little white table, but it brought tears of pride to my Uncle John's eyes the Veterans Day he came for dinner and stood by it. It was set for one person, even though nobody would be eating at it. It was just a little white table, but earlier that day Mama had told Gretchen, Samantha, and me the little white table we were setting for Veterans Day was just like the ones that have stood across America in the dining halls of the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force since the Vietnam War had ended. The table honor the men and women who serve in America's armed forces, especially those who are missing in action, our MIAs, or those that are prisoners of war, our POWs. It was just a little white table, but it felt as big as America when we helped Mama put each item on it, and she told us why it was so important. We use a small table, girls, she explained first, to show one soldier's lonely battle against many. We cover it with a white cloth to honor a soldier's pure heart when he answers his country's call to duty. We place a lemon and grains of salt on a plate to show a captive soldier's bitter fate and the tears of the family that were waiting for loved ones to return. We push an empty chair to the table for the missing soldiers who are not here. We lay a black napkin for the sorrow of captivity and turn over a glass for the meal that won't be eaten, she said. We place a white candle for peace and finally a red rose in a vase tied with a ribbon for the hope that all our missing will return someday. Mama finished speaking just as sunlight spilled on the table and filled the overturned glass. It was just a little white table, but it suddenly made me want to burst with a feeling that I couldn't explain. When Mama told us how much our setting the white table would mean to Uncle John that night, then she told us something we didn't know. Our Uncle John, who gave us big bear hugs and spun us around with airplane twirls and called me his Katie girl, was a POW in Vietnam before we were born. It was just a little white table, but it gave us the courage to ask Mama what happened to Uncle John in the war. She quietly told us the story. When Uncle John served in Vietnam, he was sent on a rescue mission, and his helicopter was shot down behind lines, she began. And he and his 3 crew members were taken prisoner. One crew member named Mike had serious wounds from the crash, but Uncle John and the other men tried to help Mike get better and persuade a guard to bring Mike medicine. And then one day the guard looked away. Uncle John and the others had a chance to escape, but Mike was still too sick to go. So Uncle John stayed behind because he wouldn't leave a fellow soldier alone so far from home. But how did Uncle John get free? We asked Mama. Sometime later, Uncle John had a chance to escape again, and somehow he was able to take Mike with him, carrying him on his back and collecting just enough rainwater and big leaves to keep them alive until Uncle John found an American infantry unit to help them. But even though Uncle John did everything he could to bring Mike home alive, Mike's wounds were just too serious and he died before the rescue helicopter landed. I know that Mike was only 20 years old and he dreamed of playing football, but he loved America enough to give his life for his country when duty called. And I know how much Uncle John loves America too, but he learned when helping Mike that a soldier risks his life for a fellow soldier because the best of your country lives in every man and woman who would lay down their lives for you too. It was just a little white table, but it needed words of gratitude, like Mama's Thanksgiving meal. So before Uncle John arrived for dinner, Gretchen and Samantha and I decided to put 3 gifts of our own on the table to honor our veterans. Gretchen colored pictures of all the objects on the table, and Samantha wrote out the words of "My Country 'Tis of Thee." But I didn't know what I, a 10-year-old girl, could ever put on the table that was as important as each veteran's gift of freedom to me. It was just a little white table, but I looked at it all dinner long, and in the quiet inside me I could almost hear the silent soldiers of the empty chair saying, "Remember us, please. We are real people like your Uncle John and Mike, who left family and friends and homes and dreams of our own to protect your birthright of liberty from disappearing as easily as sunlight from a glass." It was just a little white table, but it took my words away when I hugged Uncle John goodnight and wanted to thank him for serving our country so bravely. So I just hugged him even harder, and I told him I loved him. Uncle John hugged me back even harder than I had hugged him. And that's when I knew what I could put on the table. My promise to put the words from my heart into a little book about America's white table. And in the book, I'd use Gretchen's pictures and Samantha's song and Mama's story about Uncle John and his friend Mike, because I hoped that everyone who would read it would set a white table on Veterans Day too. So the brave Americans the little table honors would never feel forgotten by the country they love so much. Then in the salt on the little white table, I traced in the grains of their families' tears what each man and woman who serves America is to me, a hero. And that's when I saw the tears of pride fill my Uncle John's eyes. And that's the end of our book, America's White Table. So I hope you remember Veterans Day is tomorrow, and that's a good time for us to remember all of the men and women that have served our country and done lots of great things for our freedom. Thank you.